Welcome to the OShow. I'm Laura Babcock, and as you can see, we have joining us on the program Andrea Horwath. She was, of course, the leader of the official opposition at Queen's Park for many years and is now running for potentially being the first mayor of Hamilton who is a woman, something that I'm very excited about. But I've got a lot of questions for Andrea, and I know you do too. So let's dive right into it. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laura. My pleasure.
Now, I mentioned that you're potentially the first female mayor of Hamilton because it's something that's been talked about for decades, really. Are we ever going to have a woman jump into the top spot? And I have to tell you, out of the gate, I was really excited when you joined the race because I think Hamiltonians deserve a robust competition. I think it's time that we have mayors who run on more than just a singular wedge issue, who really have exciting ideas for the city. So while I appreciate, of course, that you're a woman and it affects my decision, I have a lot of other issues that I want to get through with you because I'm still between you and Keenan, to be honest. I can't make up a decision. So hopefully today we can get the kind of information out to the OShow viewers that they can make an informed decision on this race. So let me start with my first question, which is, why did you decide to make the leap? Why did you decide that now is the time to try to go for that, I think, important job?
Oh, I think it's an important job as well, Laura. And you're right. There has been a lot of talk about a possible woman mayor for many decades in our city, but it's never come to pass. And as I was finishing up as leader of the official opposition and leader of the Ontario NDP, I started to think about how can I best serve Hamiltonians. You know, I've served Hamiltonians for decades now, really, and thought that all of the experience that I bring to the table, all of the work that I've done, both elected and non-elected, for Hamiltonians, really can be, I think, positively brought forward in a way that I think will help Hamiltonians a great deal. That's why I decided to jump in. I would be honored to be able to get that opportunity to serve yet again. And I think that the work that I've done thus far is really beneficial to the position of mayor. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to take that next step and be able to work even harder for the people of Hamilton.
The first time that I think I met you, I was moderating a debate 25 years ago or something in West Hamilton when you were running federally. So I don't think anyone is challenging your long dedicated history to service for Hamilton in all the different iterations when you were a city councilor as well, I recall. But I want to pick up on a word you just used, which is finished. When you were finished as leader and finished as the head of the NDP, was it really that you finished that role and then thought, how can you serve Hamiltonians? Or had you been thinking about the mayor's role prior to that? Because a lot of people, certainly that I've heard from, and it might not be a majority, but have concerns about the timing, Andrea. And they're curious about, did you think you were going to become premier, or did you have some kind of polling that you thought, no, I'm going to see this through this provincial election, and then you got to the other side of it and realized there's other things I can be doing? Like, what was behind your decision to really quit that gig, that 4-year contract with the people, and jump into another race?
First of all, just on the very last part of your question, I really believe this is the best way I can serve Hamiltonians now. And certainly over these, we talked earlier about these years and years of people speculating about will we ever have a woman mayor. During that time, I was approached by many people to take that leap. But I had an obligation, and I take my obligation seriously. I had a commitment to the Ontario NDP, and I wasn't going to walk away from that willy-nilly. So I gave it my best. I took the fledgling NDP that didn't even have party status when I was first elected to the official opposition twice in a row. I was able to diversify our party, my party, in a way that had never been done before, and historically brought 50% women in 2014 in our caucus, in 2018 in our caucus. And this last election, we had over 60% women, as well as BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus 2S people. It was really gratifying for me that working with the people that I worked with, I took the vision that I had, that I ran on as a leader of the party back in, what was that, 2009 actually, and was able to realize those goals. but I really do believe that it was time to move on. And certainly I was running to be premier. You can't dedicate that kind of your life and energy and passion and all of your wits to something you don't think you're going to be able to do, or that you're going to be able to achieve, I guess is better to say it that way. But when it didn't come to pass, when the election ended up the way that it did, I started thinking about, first of all, I knew that it was time to move on. Good leaders know when it's time to move on, and I knew it was time to move on. Time for new blood in the party, renewal at the grassroots level, all of those things. But I also started to cast my mind to how can I continue to serve, particularly Hamiltonians, because, you know, as always, and I've said this for a very long time because it's the case, I get my passion from the people of the city. I'm in elected office, or was in elected office, because of the people of Hamilton and the things that that they've allowed me to do and to tackle on their behalf. And my passion is deep for the city of Hamilton. The people of this city are my motivators and have been really for my entire life, even before politics. And so
I don't think anyone.
It was definitely the right move in terms of that.
Nobody watching this program, Andrea, doubts any of that, right? You've been a household name since I came to the city. My question, though, is about the feelings of betrayal that some people have, because this is the second time that you've moved in over to another race. And somebody posted to me, which I hadn't thought of. What happens if there's a federal contest that comes up? What if there's an opportunity at the NDP federally for some reason? Jagmeet decides to move out away from leadership and you've got the profile. Are you ever going to jump out of the mayor's chair if you get the mandate? Like, how can Hamiltonians trust that, no, this time you stick at it because of all the reasons you just cited about how you feel about Hamilton and the opportunity?
Well, you know, it's interesting that that those things are being posted to your accounts or your social media presence. I don't hear that on the road.
Oh yeah, it's
And
not just my social media. My hairdresser just asked me about it. Teresa said, she just was going for MPP. Why is she running for mayor? So it's not just social media, and I won't have it relegated to that. That is one area.
I'm not relegating.
I'm
just actually repeating exactly what you said, but that's okay. That's fine. I'm not hearing that. In fact, I'm hearing the opposite. It's actually very gratifying for me to be out in community and have so many people approach me to say, we're so excited about the mayor's race. We're so happy you jumped in. We're so excited to have you be our mayor. And for me, coming out of the last election, particularly, having people excited about an election, first of all, is spectacular. But I don't, in all seriousness, I don't get people approaching me from, for example, from Hamilton Centre saying, I feel betrayed. You've done the wrong thing. I haven't seen my constituents respond that way, but I'm sure some people might feel that way. For me, it's about how can I best serve, and when it comes to the federal scene, absolutely not. That has never been my interest. You know this. For every order of government, you kind of get farther and farther away from the people that you represent. I found that when I went from city council to MPP, and I found it again, frankly, when I went from MPP to leader of the party, because the scope of the work that you do becomes so expansive that it's really hard to keep those connections. But I did the best of that I could, because again, that's what fueled my passion. That's what fueled my energy. So the federal scene is definitely not something, can I just finish? The federal scene is just not something I'm interested in and never have been.
So let's talk about that, the familiarity with Hamilton then, because you have been serving at Queen's Park, which means you, of course, have to be in Toronto a lot. And in provincial election campaigns, you've been going all over the province. So how do you take that time while you're still, of course, from Hamilton, and I assume have a home here during that time, but how do you take that distance, as you say, from the local sort of grassroots politic and really know what the city needs going forward? Because I looked at your action plan and I was excited that you called it that, because I've written a lot of them for companies and organizations. And so I was thinking, okay, we're going to hear not just kind of platitudes and platforms, we're going to hear specifics. She's going to say not just, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? But we're going to see some key performance indicators. We're going to see some hard targets. We're going to see some details. And what I saw looking at it was a lot of values that I agree with, a lot of solutions that I think make sense, and a lot of action words like, going to champion and leverage and all this stuff. But I didn't see those specifics, which some of the other candidates for mayor are offering. And I'm wondering, is that because you've been out of town? Are you kind of campaigning on a bit of poetry and going to govern with prose? Like, where do we hold you accountable if we're not hearing specifics, measurables, KPIs now?
Well, on the contrary, what I've learned as a leader, and I dare say a fairly successful one thus far, is that collaboration is the key. And the mayor is somebody whose responsibility it is to find the space where we can move forward on these things. We all talk about the fact that a mayor is only one vote around the council table. I want to work with the councillors, and that's woven throughout my action plan. I'm sure you've noticed that with council and staff and community, here are the things that we need to achieve. I have found that or let me just say, for me as a leader, if I just say my way or the highway, this is the way it's going to be, this is the goal I'm going to achieve, then that doesn't take into account that you really can't achieve much all on your own.
Yeah,
You
nobody
achieve
wants
through
that.
bringing people
Bob Burkina
together.
was like that as mayor,
To
and
let
one of
the
the reasons I don't want him back as mayor, right? So we get that. Collaboration is key, it's important, but I'm talking about specific achievements. So for instance, yes, collaborate, set up task force, I've read it all, and I think it's all great, but it sounds a little bureaucratic to me. I'm wondering, where are the hard targets? Where are the ambitious goals? How are you going to tackle things specifically? Like, you've like, again, Andrea, and I want you to go through these, your platform, your action plan. But I don't see in there any numbers in terms of, let's say, potential housing, or
Sure.
let's say in terms of reductions over here or plans over there. I see really well thought out, but vague promises. And I want to be able to measure the mayor, because Hamilton for too long has had mayors come in, including your predecessor, who have said, we'll set up a committee on this, we'll get a task force on that, we're going to be the green this, we're going to be the music city that, and it doesn't come to fruition. And Hamilton has too much opportunity to have it go back into committee. I want to know how is the city going to look different under your leadership?
Well, I would actually agree 100% with your assessment that we don't want to miss out on the opportunities that are ahead of us, and that's why when I talk about the city and this particular time in our history, I just think the opportunities are massive for Hamilton. But what I don't put any stock in, which is something that I've seen time and time again, which is people throwing shiny pennies out there to say, oh, this is what we're going to do. Let's take housing. I'm going to, make sure we build this many thousands and thousands of housing units. For me, it's not just about units. It's about building communities. It's about building communities where everybody can afford to live a good life. And so those numbers tend to also be distractors to kind of send people some kind of message that these numbers are all that matters. The numbers aren't all that matters. Building our city in a way that we can be proud of, and a way that we can ensure we have robust community no matter what part of the city you live in, and that we can be proud of what we're leaving to the next generations in terms of how we build those units. That's what's more important to me. So I actually do believe that those kinds of value statements and the understanding of how important these pieces are is significant. And that's why I put my platform together in that way, because that's what I've learned as a leader. And
I love the
and
value statements. I love the
actually
value statements. I agree with them. The OShow is a conversation, so I'm going to jump in. I love the value statements, and I agree with them. And I think most Hamiltonians do. And if they don't, they can learn from them, because I think there's some really good ideas in there. And the what? How are we going to do it? That collaboration and all of that, I think, is great. Your process seems solid. My question is, how do we measure against what you're saying? Because yes, great, have a community that's inclusive. Yes, great, have a place that's safe for all. Yes, great, fix our streets, and all of that is great. I want to know, because you mentioned how important transparency was and trust is after Sewergate and Red Hill. We have a population where the trust has been broken. And so if you're going to restore trust, don't we have to have specifics that we're able to say, she said this in the campaign, she said it'd be done by then, has it been done? How do we get transparency from you if we get kind of, vague notions of process?
Well, again, I think it goes back to first principles, and I don't actually believe that putting together a plan by myself with targets that I make up or that I
You said you're collaborating and talking to people. You said you
that
wrote the
are you
platform
at,
based on that.
okay, well, you know what, if you don't want me to answer the
I do
questions,
want you to answer. You said very
okay.
clearly that you collaborated. I'm sure you've seen the OShow, right? I want people watching to get an opportunity to ask the follow-ups that they would like to hear. So in your press conference yesterday, you talked about the fact that you talked to many Hamiltonians, that you collaborated, that your platform was written in collaboration. So I'm not asking for you, Andrea Horwath, to put false numbers and shiny pennies out there. I'm asking for some sort of measurements so that we're not getting the kind of vague promises and platitudes that we got from Fred 1.0 and Fred 2.0 and previous mayors. Like, what is Hamilton going to look like that's different? How are you different than Fred? How will your mayoralty, how will your leadership look different? Just if you can help me with that, I think I would feel better about the level of detail in your campaign.
Well, I can tell you one thing straight away, and that's that women leaders do things differently than male leaders. So if there's one thing that's different between me and all of the other candidates, is the fact that women's leadership skills and the way that we approach issues and the way that we approach tough situations and the way that we approach the necessity of pulling people in, it's a totally different game, and that's why I'm excited to be able to bring those skills and those capacities to the office of the mayor. And I'm not going to do the work that folks like you, pundits and folks like you, do in terms of some of the hard criticisms. But what I can say is that I believe the future is fantastic for Hamilton. Do we have things to address that are really troubling? Absolutely. But do we need to do that in a way that's collaborative as opposed to a way that's combative? That's what I believe. And that's going to take all of us. And so by putting together a plan and a vision that speaks to those values, I think is extremely important, and that speaks to the fact that women do leadership differently. And when you look, especially right now, when you look at what's happening to some women leaders that have been doing great work for a number of years, and then suddenly get unceremoniously sent packing simply because they're too experienced or they've been around too long. You know, let's check our sexism at the door, and let's check our internalized sexism at the door. I mean, I think we really have to be thoughtful about how we have these conversations.
Okay. I mean, the fact that two women are sitting here, a business owner and a pundit critic, as you point out, and yourself as a leader established, there's real opportunity here. But to me, it's my bias. I come at it from a business background. I just want to see something I can measure against, so I can go up to you in 6 months and say, you said you'd have this done by then. Where is it? And maybe we'll get that as we get closer. Maybe you'll have more details in interviews coming up, Andrea. Just one last point on that. On this, though, the conversation around Hamilton, yes, there's optimism, there's tons of ambition. In fact, I think a lot of the frustration people have, people like myself and many others, not just on social media, is that we have looked at the potential sitting for too long. We've looked at toxic politics, keeping our city from experiencing that for too long. You know, I've traveled a lot across the country, and there are other places that seem further ahead on things like public transit and housing and other issues. So we don't need that combative culture. And this is my last point on culture at City Hall before I want to get to your specifics in your platform. But the combative culture, you've been in opposition, which is a combative role, you know, and some people have seen you sort of just kind of fight. How do you take that practice, and I think you did that well, and move it into a council with a combative history and not have that be the vibe, have a vibe that is different than what Hamilton has been for so long?
Well, there's a couple of things, but first of all, I do want to assure you that there are more announcements that are coming throughout the course of the campaign. So some of those details, I guess, if you want to call them that. But I don't disagree that the way for a city or any community or any organization to move forward is to avoid that kind of combativeness, I think is what you called it. And look, there's no doubt that at the provincial order of government, official opposition leaders have a role to play. Official opposition politicians have a role to play, but everybody understands that. Certainly this premier understands that. The former premiers understood that. We're all professionals. We all understand how the provincial order of government functions and how its structure provides that requirement for the opposition to take a particular type of role, like holding the government's feet to the fire, making sure you're being as observant and as critical as possible to be able to create that accountability. At the municipal order of government, it's completely different. And so I look to the municipal order of government and the work that I did in the past, but also the work that I've done in building my party and building our presence in the legislature and building that diversity and that sense of purpose and that ability to accomplish what we were able to accomplish under my leadership. And so, yes, I have, Hamiltonians know I can always fight for them and I always will fight for them, but they also know, and I've proven, I believe, that I know how to build as well. And I know how to build in a way that's inclusive, in a way that reaches out. I've used the word collaborative, and maybe it's a bit getting long in the tooth, but certainly I have that experience. I don't just talk about it.
What do you think your current, oh, no doubt, but what do you think your currency is with the current premier? Because there are people who are concerned that maybe if Hamilton is trying to defend the urban boundary, which you've said in your press conference, you do want to defend that urban boundary. If Hamilton is looking for support from the province on a whole host of areas that we need their support, do you think that the last number of years sitting across from Ford in Queen's Park, and I saw you that day, I mean, that was pretty intense, antagonistic. It had to be. So are you going to have good currency with the current provincial administration?
Oh, I have no worries at all about that. In fact, you might recall that when I made my announcement, I had a very encouraging response from the premier. There's no doubt that, particularly at the beginning, things were pretty combative. But we came through some pretty hard times as well throughout the pandemic. And not only do I respect the current premier and his role and what he has to do to lead the province, but I have a lot of relationships. In fact, many of those folks that are sitting in the government side sat on the opposition side with me for a number of years. So I do have a lot of relationships, and I really firmly believe, certainly I take it this way, and I'm sure that most others do as well, including the premier. We all have a job to do. We're all professionals in a way, and we all have a job to do. And there are going to be times when it gets heated, and during those heated times, there are going to be the rare occasions when people lose their cool and dissolve into something more personal. But most of the time, it is absolutely about defending the people that you're defending, or debating the issues on their merits, raising the concerns that people have, and I certainly have no qualms whatsoever about my ability to reach out to talk to, and if necessary, to fight for, on behalf of Hamiltonians, the things that we think are important.
Beautifully said. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here with you, is I think that you're probably going to get the mayor's race. It's yours to lose by the polling. And I want to fight for Hamiltonians who watch this program, who want a mayor who is really going to be transparent. None of that old guard stuff where, we can't get a straight answer and we can't get a compassionate, empathetic response in a timely manner. I really, really want that the mayor of Hamilton delivers, right, on both those specifics we talked about in terms of platform, but also just in terms of that trust. You can tell by my attitude here, Andrea, that I have been angry for years at the way city has been run, not at the individuals, but at the way that we have not realized our potential. So let's talk about housing, because that's top of your list and top of my list of concerns. And I think many Hamiltonians, people are literally dying on our streets. We're coming into a cold winter, and it's going to devastate Hamiltonians and their families. There's not enough housing. What are you going to do to address deeply affordable housing as soon as possible?
Well, it's interesting, as I was kind of talking to folks about this very problem, because I think you're absolutely right. Housing is priority number one. My understanding, and I'm meeting with a group next week about this, is that there are some 3,000 units sitting, waiting to be implemented. But there are barriers that are preventing the not-for-profit sector that are providing those more deep, what we used to call deep core, but deeply affordable units from moving forward. And so I'm having that meeting next week because I believe, and they have assured me that they believe also that there are pathways forward to address that, and it has to be a priority. But there are also other projects that I know that are out there. I'm meeting with the HATS group, which I think you're aware of as well. And again, I don't have a great deal of detail on their plans, but I know they're very passionate and excited about immediate changes that can happen, immediate buildings that can be constructed fairly quickly to start to take some of those folks who are unhoused in our community and give them shelter. And you're right, with the weather changing and the winter coming, we don't want to see people freezing to death on our streets. That's completely unacceptable. There's also issues though around how our shelter system is working and how can we make that a place where people feel safer, and how do we make sure we're providing the services that people need if they do get housed, to make sure that they stay housed. So there are lots of complicated pieces around all of that. I have a lot of, you might not know this, but I have a long history in housing. In fact, I was working in social housing. I served on the chair of the City Housing Hamilton, which is another organization that we need to fix. And but also I worked in the co-op housing movement. I sat on the Housing Help Center board of directors and worked closely with them. I did tenant advocacy work when I was in the legal clinic. So housing has always been a really big piece of the work that I think is important, and I've always dedicated time and effort to it. Because how do you build a life? How do you even apply for a job? How do you go back to school? How do you prepare for a job interview, or even keep your mental health in a good place if you don't have a roof over your head that's reliable, that meets your needs, that's affordable? A roof over your head is really the crux of everything, because if you don't have that, you can't achieve anything else.
It's like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If you don't have shelter, you can't get to the rest of it. You also have a lot of experience with streets. You were part of the two-way conversion back when you were a counselor. I know I had offices downtown at the time, and supported that in terms of slow traffic. No, it was good. It was good. I was in your ward. But talk to me about going forward, because we've got ridiculous deaths on the streets. I'm afraid to send my kids to school. Like I used to say, watch for the intersection. Now I just watch, look at the cars everywhere. They jump up on curbs now and are hitting kids. I mean, what are we going to do to make our streets truly safe, Andrea?
You know, you're absolutely right, and it's horrifying to see what's happening, and it's just tragic to hear not only the injuries that have occurred, but the loss of life is just unacceptable and not necessary. I do want to say that I've watched, as the last little while, the council has done some proactive work in that regard. And I want to thank those councillors. I know that there has been a big push and a big focus on this particular issue, and they've done some great work. But that's never the be all and end all, right? We have to continue to do that work and continue to find those solutions. But also, once we have them, let's implement them constantly. Let's not build new roads that are going to be death traps, if I could use that awful term, the way that some of our old roads have been. So let's learn from these experiences as well. And as we're building new infrastructure, let's invest in infrastructure that's going to be safe from the get-go. And so some of those things you know about. I've been really happy to see the number of red light signs that where you can't make a right-hand turn. This is to protect pedestrians. Those lights that where the pedestrians signal comes on first and gives people a chance to start walking into the intersection before cars get the go-ahead, that's extremely important as well. Some of the narrowing of our, you know, what I used to call our downtown highways is really important work. Some of the bump out features and the calming features, and all of these things are excellent ways to address these issues. But I think we also need to take some proactive moves when it comes to, I want to say, information and education. And I know it's an eye roller for some people, but because I'm seized with these issues, as you are, and those other of us that really, really care about this, I'm very careful when I drive. I'm careful, even if I'm late. I would rather be late than drive too fastly on the street. Some of those lower speed limits are making all kinds of a difference in some of the neighborhoods, but only if people actually observe them. So making sure that we are not only ourselves, but in the conversations we have with others. And I think there maybe needs to be some promotional material around keeping our streets safe.
I love that because as a driver, I put on my speed limiter in town. I'm terrified of striking a child or a
Me,
cyclist. I mean,
me too.
there's a problem. Our streets have gotten very aggressive, especially after COVID. Is cycling part of that? I didn't see a lot of specifics on that, but maybe that's one of the coming announcements.
Yeah, no, cycling absolutely is. I was talking to somebody not too long ago about some of the missed opportunities maybe that we've had over our recent history when it comes to really boosting up the cycling culture here in Hamilton. You'll remember that back in, I think it was, I want to say the early 2000s, we had the cycling championships
Right.
in
Yeah.
Hamilton. And
It's right down my street, James Street South. Yes.
right on, right? And it was so fantastic. And it was such a
Yeah.
great event. And really what that should have been is really the spur to begin to really blow out this whole cycling culture in Hamilton. And I mean blow out in a positive way, like expand.
But
But
did it? It didn't.
it didn't. And you know, I think about do you remember the debate about the velodrome back in the day?
Totally. Another lost opportunity. It makes me
That's what and that's the conversation I was having with somebody not too long ago is imagine if we had taken hold of that velodrome and we had gotten that velodrome, cycling race, velodrome, bicycle lanes, all of these things would have been, I think. So you talked about other cities are doing better when it comes to some of these features. When you lose the momentum, then you're not only not going forward in the way that you could be, you're also taking a step back because you're losing opportunity, and that's something we have to really, I think, try to avoid and be. Let's not be afraid to be imaginative. Let's not be afraid. I mean, yes, this is the thing that worries me a little bit is that we've had some disappointments as a city. We've had some disappointments, and that's not a blame thing. It's just a reality thing.
Well,
But
it's a bit of a blame. It's a bit of a blame thing. I mean, come on.
let's not let those. Okay, well,
Big scandals, Andrea.
well, okay, so there's no doubt about that. But let's not let that stuff prevent us from going forward. Let's not let those things prevent our imaginations from taking hold and prevent us from really achieving positive things. And it goes back to our earlier conversation. I think there are great things ahead. There are. I know that there are. And there's a sense that people get that too. Yeah. Let's not let the past hold us back. Let's be imaginative.
I love
be
that.
excited. And let's take hold of we all know we have.
How do you avoid though becoming incalcitrant or defensive? Because, I started off the conversation asking you some tough questions because I have been very disenfranchised and disenchanted with some of our mayors, right? They come in, they promise a lot, they seem affable and compassionate. And then there's criticism. Whether from marginalized communities or there are scandals that come up, and then they retract, Andrea, and they go into a bunker and they even become cruel and make people in this city feel unwelcome and uncared for. And so my passion in this conversation is not about you specifically or you running as a woman or anything like that. It's about how do we make sure, since you might be the mayor, that openness, that optimism, that communication continues, that we don't become these lockdown camps again, because it's brutal and it upsets so many people.
Well, it's interesting. I think that criticism is a funny thing, obviously. It can hurt people, it can offend people, but constructive criticism, if it's taken constructively, can also create space for change. And that's the way I've always tried to operate. Do I have a thick skin? Maybe, but maybe not as thick as it could be. But I don't know that a thick skin is necessarily the most important thing in politics either. I think you have to be able to be empathetic, thoughtful. You have to be able to listen, and you have to be able to embrace people's ideas, people's hopes and dreams, but also their solutions and their criticisms, because it is those criticisms that help create a future that's more inclusive and that will help us to reach more opportunities.
Inclusivity is so important to you. You were down at the hate. You were down there one of those Saturdays. It took less prompting to get you to come as the leader of the provincial opposition than it took to get the current mayor to show up at those anti-hate rallies and to stand against white supremacy and to defend our LGBTQ community. I mean, you were there, Andrea, and I respect you for that. And when the LGBTQ community rather said to the city council at the time, we don't want to raise the pride flag, we don't think that, enough is being done, there was this kind of, gulf that was developed. And then when there was a violent attack at Pride, and there wasn't the response and the empathy and the feeling of that people who are marginalized in our community, that they're not valued as much, and it makes me heartsick. And so when you say you want to be inclusive and you want to make sure that you address hate and that everyone is valued, how do you do that in a way that sees actual change in terms of the culture in Hamilton? Like, I don't think you'd be performative. I think you care deeply about it. But how do you make that feel differently for people who have felt really ostracized, especially in the last 4 years?
Well, it's all about building relationships and communication pathways. When I said when I said earlier that I took my party from being pretty much irrelevant and very, very weak into where we are now, that didn't happen without having real commitments to and methods for inclusivity. And so I don't feel threatened at all by people who are from the LGBTQ community, or people who are from the BIPOC community, or folks that that come from any ethnocultural or faith background that's dissimilar from my experience. Those things don't make me afraid. I don't fear them. I'm trusting of those kinds of people. They make up our city. They're our community. They're our folks, and they need to be not only heard and seen and respected, but they need to be part of everything we do, because they are part of everything we do.
Absolutely. I love that, and I hope we can continue to see that in action. When it comes to your collaborative chops, which you've demonstrated over and over in these questions, do you think you've got the chops, the relationship building skill, to finally get us over this bloody area rating mess we've been in for 22 years now? I mean, since amalgamation, it has been fraught. And whenever I travel or hear from people who are outside of, Hamilton and some mountain wards, downtown and mountain wards, they feel like they're not connected to the city. They're resentful of amalgamation. I mean, can you get the city in that united place, Andrea?
That is something that I really hope for, because it's more than just hope, that I'm really going to strive for, because it's 22 years later. Amalgamation happened. I was on council when amalgamation happened, so I was at the very beginning of all of that. And there's a couple of things. I'm a downtowner. That everybody knows I'm a downtowner, and I'm a person that's lived in the downtown, even though I was raised in Stony Creek, and I've lived on the West Mountain. Went to school at Mac. I mean, I've been have roots in lots of parts of our city, but in my heart and soul, I'm a downtown person. But these last number of weeks and months, I've been thinking a lot about that, because we are always wanting to bring people to the downtown. Let's bring people from Bimbrook or Carlisle or Flamborough to the downtown and see how great it is. But do we ever go there?
Right.
Or what are we doing in the downtown or in the older parts of Hamilton, whether it's the lower city or the mountain, to reciprocate an interest in those other communities? People are fiercely proud of their communities, and rightfully so. They're beautiful, lovely places. It's funny, as an NDP leader, you mentioned I traveled the province. I did, and I went to some great little towns and met some wonderful people. Have I done that right here in our own backyard? I've started to, and I'm going to be doing more of it, because it's not a one-way. It's not a one-way street. I don't like one-way street.
You want to create a two-way conversation like your two-way streets back in the day, right?
I really believe that. And it actually comes to area rating. I'm going to be really upfront about it. I get the frustration that folks say that there are people who are not paying their fair share of the load, particular transit, and that kind of thing. But I think the last thing we want to do is make those relationships even more fraught by not being thoughtful about how we address that area rating piece. And so, having people pay for services that they don't have, we have to be thoughtful about that, especially at a time when the cost of everything is going through the roof and people are having a hard time maintaining their standard of living, let alone in some cases being able to even put food on the table. And it's happening everywhere in our city. And so we have to be thoughtful about that too. I really believe. I was at a Chamber of Commerce in Flamborough the other day meeting, and what this topic came up, and the guys, one of the gentlemen who owns a business there, said to me, "Just give me a bus. All I want is a bus." Now, I happen to be one of those people that believes busing, public transit, yes, they're public services. Yes, they should be delivered and provided publicly. I believe that's extremely important. But I also believe buses are an economic development and a social service. Both of those things, I think, are lenses that we need to put on the whole transit conversation.
And you're all in on LRT, right? We're not going to have to
Oh,
revisit any of that. Okay, because I don't want
absolutely.
another mayoral election decided on a bloody train. I mean, we've got bigger problems to solve in this city, right? Can we talk a
Yeah.
little bit about environmental degradation and mitigation? Because right now, BC, Vancouver had the worst air quality in the world the other day because of local forest fires. We're seeing more and more climate emergency stories happening, bigger storms, the overflow we're dealing with in terms of our storage tanks in town when there's a big storm. What are you going to do as mayor to make that not just, oh, we'll be the greenest city in Canada kind of stuff we used to hear, but actually make it safer? Because if we deal with climate change, right, don't we make our more affordable going forward? It's actually an economic strategy to deal with climate now. So what is your plan for that?
It absolutely is, but I do want to say, I'll respond, but I'm running out of time. I've got another scheduled appointment, so
You're very generous. Go
uh,
ahead.
no, that's no problem. But these are extremely important topics, and I'm happy to have a conversation. I have to say, it was terrifying to actually watch an entire town burn down in British Columbia. Like it brings tears to my eyes this moment to know that that happened in our country, and that it's poised to happen again and again and again. And so you're absolutely right. The climate emergency is upon us, and I actually spent some time in the last number of weeks looking at what's already in place in terms of the climate action plan for the city of Hamilton, and they have some really robust ideas in there and some really great plans. But the problem is we have to work the plan. We have to plan the work, which is what's been done in many cases, but we also have to work the plan. So as we go through budget cycles, let's make sure we're building in the commitments to address the climate emergency. And let's make sure, as we're talking about infrastructure improvements, that we're building to a green standard. No matter what we're doing, let's make sure when we're talking about economic development, and I think particularly about the Stelco lands, let's make sure that that does become an international, worldwide hub for green industries, for the green economy. As we seek investment and encourage, for example, more housing to be developed, let's make sure that we're retrofitting buildings and or building buildings that are LEED rated, and that are not as harmful in terms of emissions as we have been doing in the past. I look at the YWCA program on Ottawa Street, the building that they built for women who need shelter. Amazing building. I mean, completely amazing. It's a passive building that does not impact the environment in any way, and that's the kind of thinking that we have to bring as we move forward. It's not like there's a choice. It's an absolute imperative.
Well, you certainly have obviously a lot of insight on these issues and a lot of passion for Hamilton, and I'm feeling your optimism. And I also really appreciate our conversation around criticism, because there's been a lot that should be criticized with the way the city's been managed, a lot of missed opportunities, scandals, etc. And I hear from you that you are planning to operate differently as mayor. You intend to be collaborative, but also able to take incoming critique. And I agree with you. You don't need a thick skin, because then where's the compassion, right? We have to be able to still feel things. So my final question to you is, if one of the major frustrations that I think a lot of Hamiltonians had was the secrecy around Sewergate and the Red Hill and all of that, do you commit as mayor, Andrea, to being more engaged with the media, including shows like this that, are more of conversations than they are sort of standard Q&As? Are you committed to being open to that kind of engagement, that robust engagement? Or are we going to kind of see the more traditional, formal way of doing things?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's opportunity to change the way that the way that engagement happens. And that's why in my action plan, I talk about that very thing. But I don't think it's up to me to, I shouldn't say it that way. I don't feel comfortable with me deciding, here's what engagement is going to look like. I think that it's important to engage people to talk about how that engagement is going to work for them, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how people are feeling, and how people want to be feeling more attached and engaged. It only makes sense then to have that conversation as the starting point for putting together a future that solves that concern, right?
Well,
For me, that's
it would
logical.
work for me to have you back on the OShow, because I think I was hard on you because you've got the most experience. You said you have the most experience. You've done this for a long time. So I wanted to just see if we could break past some of the sort of standard platitudes. And I appreciate that you've been engaging with me. Will you come back on the program?
I will absolutely put it back to my staff, and we'll be doing everything to continue to engage people in this process. So, and I do appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you for running for mayor. I'm really excited that we have such qualified candidates and that you're so invested in our community. Have a wonderful day.
You do the same, Laura. Thank you.